Now we're going to talk about the muscles and bones for the upper arm from a front view. In order to talk about the arms, we need to learn two terms, supinated and pronated. So supination and pronation refer to the rotation of the lower arm, but it does affect the upper arm and the point of view. Okay, so supinated means that your palm is up or facing forward. Remember it, a bowl of soup, supinated, right? Pronated means that the palm is facing down or backwards, right? If I have my palm facing down and I lower my arm, my palm is facing the wall behind me. Okay. So we are going to cover a right arm from the front, and it's going to be supinated. We're not going to talk about the muscles of the lower arm, but I will include the bones. So my supinated view, I have my bowl of soup, and I'm going to just drop my arm so my palm is facing you right now. That's the view that we'll have. Okay. So we have to start with the bones. We'll start with one we know, the clavicle, that bicycle handlebar. Now we're going to start adding that acromion process at the end of the clavicle. Okay, this box, this view is kind of from underneath. And we'll include the inner view of the scapula in the back, okay? Just a little bit. So I'll draw it lightly so you know it's like x-ray vision. So your ribs are in the way, your sternum's over here, that other clavicle, okay? So your clavicle, the acromion process at the end with no muscle on top of it, that box of bone, and then it turns into the inside of the scapula. Now the main bone that we're going to be focusing on is the humerus. It's that singular bone in the upper arm. Now when we draw bones like this, think of like a cartoon dog bone, you know, those rounded parts at the bottom and the top, those are called epicondyles in real bones. So it's like that protrusion of bone. So we have an epicondyle at the top and we have epicondyles at the bottom. So fit into the shoulder. So the top of that humerus. We're going to go down, and the epicondyle that is closest to the ribs is a little bigger than the one on the outside. Right? If you have your arm supinated and you feel that knobby inner part of your elbow, it's a lot bigger than the one on the outside. So if you look at the epicondyles at the top, I left this little tiny valley in between, right? Bulky part, and then there's this little kind of like river running through these two mountains, okay? So we need that when it comes to the muscle later on. We will include the two bones that make up the lower arm, the ulna, that elbow bone, kind of in the middle. And then on the outside, if the view is supinated, we have our radius. Okay, so the radius rotates around the ulna. Radius, radial, right, makes sense. These are all of the bones that we're going to talk about. So now I'm going to draw in red to show you where the muscles are, okay? So this area is pretty complicated and you won't see it because it's not superficial, but I'm going to tell you anyway, for your benefit. So the two main muscles of the upper arm that we'll talk about are the biceps. Bicep means two-headed muscle. Okay, so the first head of the bicep that we'll talk about is the short head, which is on this interior side. Okay, it is attached to the ulna, the elbow bone, and it goes up. It's actually not like hooked onto the humerus at all, and it's actually attached on the inner part of the scapula on the inside. Okay, this is how it does it. So it's real sharp here because it's tendon, and then it's a muscle, and then it becomes a tendon again. Okay, so this is the short head of the bicep. This part is tendon, this part is tendon, this is all muscle. Muscle striations going up and down. The second head that we'll talk about is the long head of the bicep. It is attached to the radius, and it goes up in between the little valley that we made in the epicondyles, and it disappears behind that bone. Okay, so it looks like this. It's that tendon. I always think of the Loch Ness Monster whenever I draw these tendons, just these noodly little kind of brontosaurus necks. Okay, so that is the long head on the lateral side, that outer side. Okay. Now there's only one more muscle that we need to talk about, and it's going to cover up all this complication. Okay, it's the deltoid. It's that like shoulder cap. It's not going to go on top of the acromion process or the clavicle. It's going to kind of hook onto it, cliffhanger. Okay, so I think of a suit of armor when I see the deltoid hooking on to the bone, covering up all that noise. Okay, thankfully, right? You won't see any of that on the model, I hope. Okay. That's all. Not very complicated. Intricate, but simple. Deltoid, biceps. Long bicep, short bicep.